and we are just about to get started. Hopefully you are all seeing my computer screen, which says Sharing Your Harvest with Others, Sukkot and Social Justice, and lists our speakers. In just a moment, we will go through some webinar how-tos so everyone's comfortable with this technology. And then we'll get right into the meat, or I guess I should say the vegetables of the presentation, and hear from some incredible speakers who are doing great programming throughout our movement. So let us begin. So for those of you who have not participated in a webinar, or maybe haven't done so in a while, you are, as an attendee, in listen-only mode. Before the presentation begins, we wanted to review some guidelines and explain the panel that appears on your screen. So the panel that you see on your screen looks very much like the one right here. If it's getting in your way, if it's distracting, you can simply click these two little double arrows and it'll shoot right off to the side. If you want to bring it back out again, just click those two arrows, it'll just shoot right back out. If you have a question during the presentation, we encourage questions. We will have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation, but if you have a question that you'd like to ask, you're welcome to virtually raise your hand using this cute little button, the hand, or you can type your question in the question log box, which is on the side of your screen. We may save some of those questions until the end to the Q&A session, but you're welcome to enter a question at any time during the course, and we'll try to answer those questions. I do want to make a point to mention right now that this session is being recorded, and it will be available on our website following, and probably by the end of the week. We try to get them up there as soon as we possibly can. So you have two options for audio, which hopefully you are already logged into either your telephone or the microphone and speakers on your computer. I typically recommend that we use the telephone rather than the microphone and speakers, especially if you're interested in asking a question, not typing it, but asking it so that we can hear you. It just makes it easier because many computers don't have the microphone, but they do have speakers. And the information on how to log right in is right here on your screen. If you have any other problems with your webinar, if you have any challenges, you're welcome to type questions into the question log box on the side, or you can contact GoToWebinar, the number listed on your screen or on their website. And I'll leave this slide up for just 1 second in case you need to jot that down because you're having trouble. And again, thank you for joining us and for your patience as we go through these helpful tips. And I'd love to pass it off to my colleague who will get us started.
So, Bruchim Habaim, welcome to this webinar. This is Sue Levi-Elwell, and we've all been enjoying as we build our Sukkot and make plans to fulfill the mitzvah of Lashev Bet Sukkah, to sit in the Sukkah. So even for some of us, I hope we'll have the great pleasure of actually constructing a Sukkah, perhaps at home, perhaps on the grounds of the synagogue, and I hope that all of us have at least one and hopefully more than one meal in a sukkah with others celebrating our harvest. So I wanted to quickly look at some of the foundational texts from the Torah, next slide please, that help us know what we're doing. And I've chosen 3 texts here. The first is from Exodus, and each one of these texts is going to give us something different, is going to kind of build on the one before. So we're going to look at Exodus, at Deuteronomy, and then at Leviticus. Not exactly in the order that sometimes we would expect, but we're going to see something new in every text. So I wish that we were sitting in a room together. I would ask you to read. Failing that, and this will be a short part of our presentation, but just to remind us what we're doing here together. And the Feast of the Ingathering at the end of the year, when you gather in the results of your work from the field. So the idea, the results of our work, we often talk about this sacred partnership that, of course, we can't make the crops grow by ourselves. But here in the Torah, there is a clear indication and reflection that without the sweat of the human brow, so to speak, there would be no crops. Of course, there are things that grow in the wild, but we are talking here particularly about cultivated food. The next quotation here from the book of Deuteronomy: after the ingathering from your threshing floor and your vat, you shall hold the festival of booths for 7 days. So here we have, first of all, the threshing floor, grain, and your vat. So here this is pointing us towards probably the making of wine. So we've got at least 2 different kinds of produce that are made by human hands. And we also learn here that this is going to be a 7-day harvest. And here we find one of the most important directions that we have from our Torah. You shall rejoice in your festival. You shall hold a festival for your God 7 days. We already knew that, in the place that God will choose, and God will bless all the crops and our undertakings. And here it's underscored, you shall have nothing but joy. So here, you shall rejoice and have nothing but joy. So here, after the contemplative, quiet, inward time, particularly that we've spent on the day of Yom Kippur, we're supposed to go forth in joy. Next slide, please. We will see that in the book of Leviticus, we have a historical reason. And we know now exactly what day it is. Neither of the previous texts said when. One said the end of the year, which is interesting because, of course, we're at the beginning, but we're at the end of the planting year. But here we know exactly, 15th day of this 7th month. This 7th month, which is for us the first month, the month of Tishrei. So, again, 7 days. The first day is particularly sacred for us, and now we learn for the first time that we shall live in these booths, that we shall be in these booths, and not just the leaders, not just heads of households, but all citizens of Israel shall live in booths. And those of us who live in a particularly Jewish neighborhood or a particularly religious Jewish neighborhood can walk around and see Sukkot of all sizes hanging off balconies, built in yards. Those of us who have had the opportunity to spend time in Israel during Sukkot know that we, mamash, truly see that people do erect Sukkot everywhere. For us, often it's just in the synagogue yard, but in intense, observant Jewish neighborhoods, we see many of them. Here is the historical reason. In order that future generations may know that I made the Israelite people live in booths when I brought them out of the land of Egypt. So this idea also of this temporary dwelling in preparation for creating a perfect society, because that's, of course, what we Jews were doing, coming out of slavery, and we needed time to learn how to become a people with responsibility to one another. I wanted to share with you, and this is our next slide, an excerpt from quite a wonderful book that I hope will become familiar to you. We didn't put the citation of the book, but I'm going to tell you what it is. This is from Jill Hammer's book, The Jewish Book of Days, published by the Jewish Publication Society in 2006. Rabbi Jill Hammer has written a wonderful guide with essentially a page a day to guide us through a spiritual and historical approach to our holidays. This is her page for the 4th day of Sukkot, and she underscores the fact that the sacrificial offerings during Sukkot are traditionally, as you see on the right-hand side, the most complex of any biblical festival. Now, she's referring to yet another citation in the Torah that we didn't take a look at, and that is the list of the sacrificial offerings that shall be offered. What's particularly interesting here, and she makes a point of it, is the tradition that's mentioned in the Talmud of sacrificing 70 bulls or oxen at the temple on behalf of the 70 nations of the world. Traditionally, descendants of Noah were those who started all the nations of the world, and in ancient times, in our biblical time, it was thought that there were 70 such nations. I actually didn't check to see how many nations there are. It's changing all the time, of course, but we have way more than 70 now. But this was the biblical number, and the idea that we would be offering an animal in honor of each nation in the world. And then we see this lovely citation from our rabbis. My children, I know that this is the lower left-hand side of our screen. My children, I know that on all the 7 days of the Sukkot festival, you are busy with offerings on behalf of the peoples of the world. Well, it just so happens, today is not the 4th day of Sukkot. We're getting ready for Sukkot, of course. But today is the UN International Day of Peace. And I hope that some of you, after this webinar is over, will check on your screen and go to amillionminutesforpeace.com, amillionminutesforpeace.com, and see a wonderful Prayer for Peace project that has been done by the Odyssey Networks. We at the URJ have participated in this in support of this UN International Day of Peace. And we find that here we have this lovely quote that Rabbi Hammer teaches us, and with this I will end. We may not expect others to begin celebrating Jewish holidays, but perhaps one day nations will celebrate harvest together in peace, a sign of our commitment to the earth and to one another. Each nation and individual has a responsibility to work toward that day. So with this idea about our responsibility to the world for honoring harvest, I turn you to my colleagues and friends who are going to share the work of their hands for you in preparing a Sukkot that really reflects our ideals and our values and commitments.
Great. Thank you so much, Rabbi Elwell, for sharing those words with us and framing our conversation today. This is Rachel Cohen calling in from the Religious Action Center in Washington, D.C., and I'm happy to introduce this afternoon our two presenters who are going to tell us a little bit about the stories of how they've shared their harvest at their congregations. We're joined by Rabbi Joel Simons of University Synagogue in Los Angeles and Robert Neville of Congregation KAM Isaiah Israel in Chicago, Illinois. And they're both going to tell us a little bit about how they got their garden project started at their synagogue, some of the amazing successes that they've had. We're going to have a chance to see quite a few pictures of the great work that they've done. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Rabbi Joel Simons at University Synagogue in Los Angeles.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, and thank you so much to the Religious Action Center and the Union for Reform Judaism for all the work that you do to really promote and educate on these very important subjects. I'm not really following the slides I put together, so anytime you would like to turn the page, you're more than welcome to. We at the University Synagogue are entering almost our 1-year anniversary of the creation of our synagogue garden. And this started a few months after I was ordained and came here to University Synagogue. And I was reflecting with a congregant of a story that happened to me my first year of rabbinical school. Actually, my second year of rabbinical school, when I was the student rabbi at a congregation, and the majority of the congregation, the majority of the congregants had farms. And I was doing Torah study one day about one of the interesting passages in Torah that dealt with agricultural issues. And one of the congregants turned to me and he said, "Rabbi, you've never farmed before in your life, have you?" And I kind of smiled and I said, "No." And he said, "Come to my farm and I will show you how I connect with Torah." And he brought me to his farm, and in walking the fields with him, I really saw his deep connection with the land, and how his deep connection with the land really provided for him a deep connection with Torah and with God. And it was an amazing eye-opening experience for me. so when I was ordained and when I started working here at University Synagogue, I really wanted to be able to take that experience into the congregational setting. We do not have a large area at all. We have a very small area, only about 8 raised beds we were able to have in our garden. But through those raised beds, we've been able to plant and harvest a number of various vegetables. And 100% of our produce is donated to local food pantries. When I started to meet with congregants here at University Synagogue, we started to reflect that the big thing in the blogosphere today is being a foodie. People are obsessed with food nowadays. Chefs have become celebrities, and there is just something, every time you turn on a different channel, there is a chef or there is a food program. And we started realizing that this is an amazing thing out there, and yet it's really only allowed to be experienced by a certain population. And then we started to reflect deeper on the wonderful farmers markets that the majority of us attend throughout the week, and all this amazing produce that we have the ability to buy and to experience. And we realized that by and large, when our congregations donate to food pantries, when we have when we bring in our bags of food for the High Holy Days, it's only canned food. And when you go into these food pantries, you don't see a lot of fresh vegetables. And there is this aspect of healthy eating that's really not exposed to in lower income neighborhoods. So the goal of the creation of our garden was to provide organic, fresh produce to low-income neighborhoods, to individuals who don't have a chance to experience this kind of food, to connect our congregation with parts of the Torah that we've previous to this point have only studied, but now we can study this with our hands, and to really see that there are parts of our society in which we take for granted. Specifically, this idea of being able to be a foodie, being able to be wrapped up in a organic food society, when realizing that a few miles away from us in Los Angeles, there are individuals who, by and large, eat their vegetables out of a can every day. And so one of the wonderful things about our garden is that it's showing congregants that not only are we able to harvest this food, but then we're actually able to pick it and to drive it on over to these food pantries and to be able to provide an organic, healthy option for those who shop at and receive their food from the food pantries. And the wonderful thing about it is that we've been able to do this with a limited amount of space. As you can see from some of our pictures, this is 2 feet away from our driveway. But yet through these 8 raised beds, 200 pounds of produce have been donated this year to the food pantries, anywhere from zucchini to radishes to beets to snap peas, and from all of this, we've been able to show the different populations on the variety of vegetables that are out there. When we started to meet with the food pantry, we were told that the vegetables that they really only serve are broccoli, carrots, and celery. And that when we started to bring in beets, and when we started to bring in zucchini, and we started to bring in snap peas, individuals who were coming in had never really seen this before. And they started to ask questions, how do you cook this? And now they're starting to be exposed to fruits and vegetables that they normally would not have been exposed to. And I wish that we were able to stock the shelves of this food pantry every week, but with the limited space that we have, we can only provide so much, but at least we're able to provide a little bit here. More to that then, it's also energized a certain aspect of our congregation. Our youth group, as you can see from the slide up, these are 3 of our youth group members who came once a week during the summer. These youth group members who did not go to summer camp and did not do their Israel trip, they came to the garden once a week, and they harvested the food, and they took pictures, and they drove it to the food pantry. And so it's allowed some of our younger members of our congregation to really understand what it means to grow our own food, what it means to have organic food, what it means to to have a food that is sustainable, what it means to cut back on pollution by not bringing food in from faraway areas, and what it means to allow others to eat the way that we are able to eat. So from our preschool to our religious school to our youth group to any member of our congregation, they've all been involved with our garden, and it's allowed us to do some really interesting programs. This year, for the first time, we're going to have 2 Sukkot here at University Synagogue, our regular sukkah that we have every year, but then we bought a small sukkah to put right next to our garden so that we can teach that one of the aspects of having a sukkah was historically so that individuals would be able to set up temporary housing at their fields when it was time to harvest. So now we're able to teach another aspect of Judaism by having a sukkah up at our field when we are starting to harvest. And from this, we've seen a lot of bar and bat mitzvah students choose the garden as one of their mitzvah projects to help tend the garden, to help plant the garden. So it's been something that has allowed individuals to bring their passion into their Judaism. Of course, our goal would be to expand the garden at some point to get rid of the raised beds and to do it within the ground. But this is all in due time. But what it's really taught us is that anywhere where we have a little bit of sunlight and a raised bed, we can plant and we can grow. And with that, I will turn it on over and look forward to some of your questions afterwards. Thank you.
Thanks, Rabbi. It was great a couple months ago when we first connected and heard the story of the garden that you're working on to now see almost 1 year into the project how far you all have come. I'm really excited to turn things over to our next presenter, Robert Neville, the Social Justice Committee Chair and a member of the board at KAM Isaiah Israel in Chicago, who is going to tell us in pictures the story of their garden. And Robert and I have been working together for quite a while on synagogue gardens and sustainability and using their garden as an example for other congregations and other faith communities. And Robert is going to tell us a little bit of their story and how far their congregation has come, again, in not much time and with not too much space to really make a tremendous positive impact on their community. So with that, I turn it over to you, Robert.
Well, Rachel, thanks very much, and thank you to all of you for participating in this webinar, and to, excuse me, the URJ and the RAC. And Rabbi Simons, that's a beautiful project you've got in Los Angeles, so I think that's just a terrific beginning for you. Just a brief history of KAM Isaiah Israel. It is one of the oldest congregations in the Midwest. We are in our 173rd year of existence. So it was formed about 3 years after the city of Chicago was incorporated. We're located in the Hyde Park area of Chicago, near the University of Chicago, and also in a neighborhood which has, which in some ways can be characterized as suffering from having food deserts. And we are also, at the same time, across the street from President Obama's house. So we're located on a tight urban site in Hyde Park, Illinois, and all the challenges that Rabbi Simon has pointed out with a tight urban site at play. And briefly, my involvement with KAM Isaiah Israel, I joined the synagogue 3 years ago, and about a year and a half into it, the then chair of the Social Justice Committee convened meeting looking for ways to green the synagogue. So in February of 2009, this meeting was held, and I suggested that we plant a food-producing garden. That first year, then, we, if you'd like to advance the slide, Rachel, well, we'll come back. If you want to advance one more. You can advance one more slide, please. The first year, the food that we harvested was given to the members of the congregation, and after that fall, we then held a weekend, a food justice weekend, on the anniversary of Dr. King's birth. And at that point, I had become the chair of the Social Justice Committee. I think under the notion that no good deed goes unpunished. We had the garden for about 6 or 7 months. Then the then chair of the Social Justice Committee stepped down. I was appointed chair of the committee and shifted the focus of social justice to food justice and sustainability. That January we held a symposium, a Martin Luther King symposium, and if you want to advance the slide. I think that one more, please. Right, and there we had a symposium in honor of Dr. King's anniversary of his birth, in which we discussed ways to move the social justice program, focus on food justice and sustainability, into a community-wide effort. And you can see Rachel there participating in this symposium. Again, this is January of 2010, and out of this symposium came the idea that we would try and affect change within our local community. So Rachel, if you want to go back 2 slides. And you see now in the upper left is the courtyard of our synagogue. And you see us, actually we'll go back one more, please. The first slide in the upper left, a picture of a bicycle in the yard there. That's the lawn that we started our garden in. Slide to the right shows us laying out the Star of David. This is an ornamental food-producing garden. When we presented this to the synagogue, the board of directors back in February or March of 2009, they were rightfully concerned about how a food-producing garden would look across the street from the President of the United States house in a residential neighborhood, a tight urban site. So we suggested an ornamental food-producing garden, which you can see takes on the shape of the Star of David. So if you can advance to the next slide. And then you see in the upper right, the June of 2009, the first phase of that garden. In the bottom left, you see it in the height of the growing season, August of 2009, and then in the bottom right, a year ago, putting the garden to bed in its completed state. So there you see the ornamental food-producing garden, and our program all centers around the center of that Star of David. All of the food that we grow and we donate is done within a 1-mile radius of the center of that Star of David, and that's one of the pieces that came out of our symposium in January of 2010, that we would approach this problem of food justice on a local basis. Now, if we could go back to the goals for a moment, which I think is the second slide. There you go. Right. We have 7 goals, and I want to talk briefly about those 7 goals of our program and how we've gone about accomplishing them. The first is to grow and donate a significant amount of organic food. In the first, this year we have grown and donated over 530 pounds of organic food, fresh produce to 2 soup kitchens and a shelter for women and children. We do not take our food to food pantries. We take it to soup kitchens, and there are reasons for that, which I can explain at some other point. And we have also started a gleaning program. And later on, I'll show you a slide of in this south side of Chicago, there are a number of large community gardens in which a lot of the food goes, a lot of the plants go untended. And we are putting into place now a program we call the White Rock Program, where we go on Sunday afternoons and we collect that food which has been left untended by the gardeners. The second goal is to be good stewards of the land, and we do that by converting unproductive lawn to food production. It means no more mowing of the grass. It means no chemical additives to the grass. We also compost on the site. The third goal is to establish KM Isaiah Israel as a congregational model of food production and sustainable land use. We've got a tight urban site in a residential neighborhood across the street from the President's house. Obviously, aesthetics are a concern. There are many buildings in many congregations, churches, synagogues, mosques in this area, which are, as I like to say, roasts in the middle of a serving platter surrounded by garnish. meaning large buildings sitting in unproductive lawns. We have developed what I would call a kit of parts, a way to help other congregations install similar gardens. It's a replicable model, and we are prepared to go in to these other congregations. We identify their unproductive lawns, and we'll help them install a garden similar to our own. Fourth goal is to attract new young members to KM. The work, the sense of community, and the topic, as Rabbi Simons pointed out, is a terrific draw to young people. It is bees to balm, and it has also been a wonderful way. We have a number of young people have come from throughout the community to come work in our garden when they hear about it. They came to our social justice weekend, and they get quickly involved in the garden, strengthen our community and surrounding community. We have 45 members of the community have worked in ages from 4 years to 80. 70 overall have worked. We are involved in a One Chicago, One Nation program with the Muslim community. So we have to do interfaith outreach. We're involved in the Growers organization in the South Side and various other organizations. Educating our KM community and our surrounding community about healthy eating and sustainable land use. We do that through our symposium and our workshops, through our Sunday school program, doing radio shows, having guests in the garden, and being a leader in food justice, environmental responsible and sustainable land use within our community and throughout the reform movement. We do that by being a leader, by putting our garden front and center right out on 51st Street in Greenwood in Chicago, a very prominent location across from the President's House, and we team up with the URJ and the RAC. Now, if you want to go ahead and move through the slides, and I'll make a few comments to show you how this applies to. Okay, here we are in the second year expanding our garden so that we can have it as a model for others to follow. You see in the upper left we have children, not children, high school kids from doing their community service. We're now expanding out on the Hyde Park Boulevard side of our congregation. Next, please. Here's back to our Star Garden. The Star Garden is about 900 square feet, and what we call the South 540, where the tomatoes are out on Hyde Park Boulevard, it's another 540 square feet. So we're a little under 1,500 square foot garden. You see pictures of chard and kale and cucumbers. Next, please. And then the side of our building at Hyde Park, on Hyde Park Boulevard, the South 540. Next, please. Some of our harvest from this year. Next, please. More of the harvest. Again, we've taken out over 530 pounds. I suspect we've got about another 3 weeks of harvesting. We hope to be around 600 or 700 pounds by the end of this season. Next, please. These are our synagogue is in the upper left, a Byzantine building with a minaret, historic landmark building from 1924. In the right, in the upper right, is Corpus Christi Church, where we take our food every Tuesday night to Sister Marilyn, who's a wonderful spokesperson for healthy eating. Bottom left is the Kenwood United Church of Christ, where we take food on Sundays, and we share that our harvest on Sundays with St. Martin de Porres, a shelter for women and children. Next, please. Here we are on the left taking our food to the shelter. Upper right, some of our gardeners preparing to take harvest, and down below on our way to take the harvest. Next, please. This is an example of a community garden in the south side, a 1-acre community garden where we're going to start doing our gleaning project, where we actually have started doing our gleaning project. Next, please. Young people coming to work in the synagogue, 2 examples of that. 20-something-year-olds just find this a wonderful opportunity to get involved with a good cause and involving food and food justice and the environment. Next, please. Our gardeners, ages 80 to 4. I won't tell you who's 80 and who's 4, but you can figure it out. Next, please. Sunday school, KM Isaiah Israel Sunday school children coming to learn about the environment and its relationship to Judaism. Next, please. In our interfaith outreach program, we have a connection with a group of Muslims, and here we are one evening having one of our members reading to the Muslim children. Their parents came with them. We started a dialogue about food justice. This garden gives us a great opportunity to have people into our garden and talk about an issue which is common to all of us, and a common ground, a great link. And this has been a terrific part of our program, this interfaith outreach. Next, please. And for building community within our synagogue, halfway between our first planting and Sukkot of last year is what farmers call midsummer. Erev Midsummer, we had a reading of Midsummer Night's Dream and a meal right in the garden. And you can see all the folks that came to join us for that reading aloud of the play and dinner. Next, please. We also had a harvest dinner where congregants could come and harvest food on a Thursday night, and then Saturday night we had a harvest. They made dinner from the food that they harvest and made dinner to share with the congregation. Next, please. And last, this is a typical Sunday harvest, and a small, any typical Sunday we have about a dozen people come and work. We have had 70 people work throughout the year, 45 of whom are members of the congregation. This would be a fairly typical Sunday turnout. We garden on Sundays from 10 until 1, and we harvest on Tuesday evenings and Thursday evenings. About every 48 hours we take between 20 and 30 pounds of food out of the garden and deliver to the soup kitchens and shelter. So it has been a terrific experience for me. It has grown in many wonderful ways in just a year and a half. It seems as though every direction we turn is another opportunity to connect with different groups. It has got an educational component, a community outreach component, an interfaith component. We are donating good food and talking about eating good food and the importance of taking care of the environment. So that's a sum of where we've been for a year and a half.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Rabbi Simons. This is, once again, Naomi Abelson, Social Action Specialist for the Union for Reform Judaism. I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to learn even more about these two incredible programs and have the opportunity to let you share those programs with other members of our movement in the hopes that we can all learn from your efforts and possibly replicate them. So at this time we want to do some Q&A. We've already been receiving some questions that we're going to address in this session, and you're welcome to continue to type in questions or virtually raise your hand as you learned earlier today, and we can unmute you so you can ask those questions if you'd like. To get us started, I actually would like to, I'm going to take the authority to ask my own question, which is, can you each maybe share maybe one or two challenges that you faced and how you overcame them in the process of creating these new programs that have really transformed your community?
Sure. I'll begin. I think for me, one of the challenges was that once I had the group of people and once we were committed, none of the people in the group had really ever farmed before, had really ever gardened before. So we were we were really nervous that maybe it was not going to produce what we had hoped it would produce. Maybe it was not in the right location. So we were really nervous at the get-go that we had put some time and some money and some effort into this, and that we just were not sure if it was actually going to produce what we had hoped it would. Luckily it did, but I think at the beginning there was just a lot of, not a lot of risk, but just some risk involved in that we had put a lot of publicity out there and not sure if it would turn out in our direction.
I think for us, the two challenges that quickly come to mind. The first is to convince a board in advance of the garden that the garden could be beautiful. We have, as I've said a number of times, a prominent site on a very busy intersection across the street from the President of the United States' home. And so to suggest that we tear up a lawn, which is sacred still in this country, the idea of a lawn in front of a building, the idea that we should tear up a lawn and plant a crop was understandably a bit nerve-wracking, I think, for the board at the time, which I think quickly became, those fears quickly went away when we suggested an ornamental food-producing garden. And there is some history of that in history of landscape architecture. The other challenge has been powdery mildew, and we have lost a certain amount of crop this year to powdery mildew. The weather in Chicago, I'm quite envious, Rabbi, of your weather in Los Angeles. I read on your website that you started gardening in November. In November, we don't shovel soil in November. We shovel snow, and so our growing season is fairly short. And to take out 600 or 700 pounds of food, you've got to it teaches people yet another respect for the environment and climate. And this summer was extraordinarily hot in the Midwest and really across the globe, really. But many a lesson was learned this summer about weather. So powdery mildew and tearing up a sacred lawn, I say that in quotes, a sacred lawn, to replace it with food production, a really radical idea that this synagogue embraced, and I'm pleased to say the support we've gotten from the synagogue from it has been fantastic. So.
Great. So Noam asked the question, this was early on in the session, he was asking, Rabbi, how did you guys decide on the vegetables used for the project? But I'm actually going to ask both of you to answer. How did you decide on which vegetables you were using?
So Robert makes an amazing point. We had originally looked at that we wanted to plant in November, and so we had decided which vegetables could we plant in November. And at the beginning, we wanted to see which vegetables could provide the most amount of nutrients, which vegetables the community could really benefit from, and which vegetables we can gain the highest yield from. But this was interesting in the fact that we started to learn quickly about climate and whatnot, that we were able to plant vegetables in November, in December, in January that traditionally one should not be able to plant. And it raised a lot of interesting questions and discussions.
Exactly. And we have, since this was our second year, we had, this year our selection had something to do with crop rotation and that sort of thing. But we select our plants based on a number of things. One is the climatic zone that we're in. Another is the most sort of a large variety to introduce people to all manner of different foods. When we take our tomatoes to the soup kitchen, you can see in the picture that, we have everything but red tomatoes, it seems. And the idea, you open people, the visual of the food, and you open people's eyes to the range of produce. So not all tomatoes are the size of a baseball, and they're round and perfect. So for variety, some plants complement plants, and there are botanic reasons for certain selections as well.
We have another. This is actually a comment which I found interesting. Joel suggests that rather than using the term foodies, there's a new term for impassioned healthy food consumers, which he wanted to share, which is farmies. Those who are obsessed with good, delicious, healthy food that comes from healthy farms. And he also mentions that as someone who is obsessed with healthy and conscientiously managed farms that are the source of wonderful food that pleases us foodies so much. So I wanted to share that feedback. I also wanted to mention once again that this presentation will be archived on our website. The PowerPoint presentation will also be available that you can open and check out. Now back to the questions. Have either congregation had to deal with animals? And what do you do when you're sharing this with some of our furry and feathered neighbors, as David so cleverly states?
Well, I'm laughing because, as I've mentioned, we're across the street from the president's house, and so we garden under the watchful eye of the Secret Service, and so there are many a joke that go back and forth, about the Secret Service. But I did learn from the Secret Service on Sunday that the reason why our sunflowers, don't get past 4 feet is because they tell me the squirrels climb to the top of them, sway back and forth as if on a metronome while eating the sunflower. There are, this time of year, the squirrels and the squirrels especially are starting to store up for the winter, so we are seeing some of our plants being affected by it, but it is not a significant problem at this point, though we don't like to talk about it much. It's kind of a magical thinking, I think. Insects are probably a bigger problem.
Yeah, we have not had to deal with animals, but I would agree. We do have some insect problems at times.
We actually have a question here from Gary who has his hand virtually raised, so I have unmuted you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Very good. Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the invitation. I found this very interesting, and particularly, Robert, the synagogue and the layout is beautiful. I like the star. For those who don't know, I'm the founder of ampleharvest.org, which does, on a personal level, what we've been discussing here on the synagogue level. The question, and that's connecting home gardeners with food pantries around the country. What further can we do to make the members of the congregations aware that their own crop from their own gardens can get to local food pantries? How do we get that spread throughout the synagogues in the country?
That's a wonderful question, and I think it's something that our social justice committee has talked about doing this year. I think for us, the garden has made a number of people in the community aware of the food that they give to food pantries, and so I think more sermons, more educational activities, more publicity around this, and this is something that a lot of our members are starting to take their produce and bring it here to the synagogue, and then we donate for them. And then a lot of our members have started their own gardens at home to be able to do this.
I agree. I think it's education, which is sort of an obvious statement of fact. But what having a garden allows us to do, and I'm sure you've found this in Los Angeles as well, once you start to produce food and significant amounts of food, then you're actually in a position to ask people to help you produce more food. It is different than, it puts you in a much better position when you're producing significant amounts of food yourself to then go and ask for help in producing more. And I think that's really a key to a key to it, actually.
Okay, thank you.
And then we're going to conclude with just one more question, and then we have some other slides that we wanted to share. If we have not gotten to your question, we will definitely answer it by email and share that with you after the session has concluded. So can you perhaps, Robert, can you elaborate on why you chose to give the food to the soup kitchen rather than the soup pantry? Actually, we may have one more question after this, but why don't you take that one?
I'd be happy to. There are a number of reasons. First of all, it is fresh produce, and it's delivered that day, the day or the day after that it's harvested. And soup kitchens, we know for a fact that the food will be used used for the next several meals. When you take the food to a food pantry, you have first of all issues of packaging. A number of people who come to food pantries often are given bags of groceries and then have a couple of bus rides to take them home, and the actual packaging, putting say 2 pounds of ripe tomatoes in a bag that has also canned goods in it, and getting on a couple of buses and carrying them up 3 flights of stairs. The tomatoes have got a real odyssey to get to the table, and also you're not certain that people who then take them home will use them before they perish. The fruit perishes, and so that's really the packaging at soup kitchen. At food pantries, it makes it difficult. Also, food pantries, the collection is maybe once a week or every 2 weeks, and the idea of fresh produce is that it be used. I mean, it's best if used that day or the next day. That's the other reason why we take it to the soup kitchen, so it's used right away, and we're almost certain that it's actually getting used.
Sure. So in your case, the food pantries that are accessible to you aren't maybe the best choice for you, but in other cities it could be that these challenges that you face may not be made present.
Oh, to be, yeah. Sorry. That's absolutely the case, and it is because our program is within a 1 mile walking walking radius, a 1 mile walk from the center of our garden. We have that opportunity as well. If you don't have soup kitchens close by, that doesn't work for you.
Great. So then my real last question here is will lead us right into the next steps that Rachel will be discussing. But before we do that, could either of you just maybe take a second or two to mention if you're a congregation who hasn't engaged in building creating a garden and harvesting, what would your first step be? What would you recommend first steps for someone who's interested in getting started?
Well, first of all, first step would be to email us if they'd like. We'd be happy. We've set up a model. We'd be happy to share that. I think it's also we've done something similar with the REC. I think they've got I think they've got our program up on the site, if I'm not mistaken, a sort of a step-by-step approach. But we would be happy to help any congregation get started, and so I would think that would be the first step. Just contact us, and we'll get them set up.
Absolutely, and I think the biggest thing is, gather a group of people who are committed and interested. And also, from what you could see from both of our presentations today, is that space should not be an issue. There's not one kind of a garden, and so there's many different ways one can go about this. And so really look, be creative, and get a few people who are interested in this, and it can really just start to go from there. But don't feel that you need to have an enormous space at the beginning.
I'd like to add one thing, and that is if anyone is in Chicago in November for the forum, they're welcome to come by our garden. And if they are here in January, I know Chicago is a wonderful place to vacation in January. We will be running a workshop on how to start a garden for your community again this year. that's free and open to anyone who shows up. So we will run a how-to and exactly go through all the steps from the beginning. That'll be the
That's
middle
a great
of
plug to the North American Forum, which is taking place, which has a social action track in Chicago in November, the first Shabbat of November. And now I want to pass it off to Rachel.
Thanks, Naomi, and thanks to our presenters again. You know, as Naomi said, we've heard these stories a couple of times before, but every time I hear the stories of, you know, whether it's a synagogue garden or a program on food and social justice that a congregation is hosting, it's just amazing to see the potential for community building and working with youth groups and interfaith outreach and environmental sustainability, sort of all these pieces coming together around issues on food where we really can find common ground and areas to work together really is inspirational. And that is exactly why last November at the URJ Biennial in Toronto, we launched what's called the Green Table, Just Table initiative. So just wanted to take a moment to highlight some of the resources that are available as part of this project, which is really designed to help Reform congregations and Jewish communities engage in meaningful conversations around food and food justice and all of the environmental, economic, public health, and other concerns related to what we eat, the way we produce, distribute, consume our food, and what we do with our food waste. So this site is urj.org/food. And as Robert mentioned, we did use the KIM Isaiah Israel congregation, their garden, as a model for the garden guide, which you'll find if you go to this page and actually scroll down just below where the screenshot is here. You can find the garden guide with step-by-step directions for what to do in your own community and contact information for the sort of expert gardeners that we spoke to create that piece. And some of the other resources that you'll find here, you know, we hope that many of you on the call today are inspired to start a project like this at your congregation or grow a project that you already have, pun intended, but also know that a garden won't be right for every congregation, but there are so many other ways to engage with this issue, whether it's through community-supported agriculture or hosting adult education or religious school curriculum on food issues and ethical eating. So we have on the site resources to help facilitate all those different kinds of conversations, as well as a program bank with about 10 congregational examples of a whole variety of programs around food justice issues, a listserv that you can sign up for news, information, sharing of programmatic ideas, pieces on synagogue policies and blessings and different interpretations of Jewish tradition around food, just a whole sort of a variety of resources to help folks who are interested in this issue engage in new ways, and we welcome feedback on the site, ideas for pieces that we can add, et cetera. So that's one sort of next step from here. And we wanted to mention just two other pieces. I know we're coming right up on 4 o'clock, but hope that this will be something helpful for folks to take home as we think about what's next. So we've talked about environmental sustainability and energy use quite a bit today, and we know we've been through quite a few holidays this month and have quite a few more to come, but many of our congregations, as part of a Jewish community-wide effort, this October 8th and 9th during Shabbat Noah, will be talking about environmental issues using Shabbat Noah as a frame to really engage with what is environmental sustainability and how can we really be conscious of our energy use in our homes, in our synagogues, in our communities. And again, you'll see the links on the site, on the slide rather, that have the resources that the Religious Action Center and our partners at the Coalition on the Environment and Jewish Life have prepared for Shabbat Noach, which include text studies, ideas for speakers, prayers that you can use in your services around Gulf restoration, the flooding in Pakistan, all these other effects of climate change and our energy use that we're seeing. And consciousness, you know, is certainly on the rise in our communities. And obviously the question is, what can we do now? So we hope that some of the conversation that we've had today will help inspire those next steps, and that some of the resources that we've prepared will be helpful in those conversations. And finally, as we close, we're really thrilled that we'll be hosting a series of webinars like we've done today throughout this year, all focused on sort of different aspects of environmental sustainability issues, food, energy use, resource conservation, and talking about how all of these different topics connect to our Jewish values, holidays, texts, traditions, teachings, etc. So we encourage everyone who's on the call today to sign up for the future sessions, and you'll, of course, get reminders about them through our listservs and our various websites, emails, newsletters. But we are planning the series throughout the year and hope that by joining for as many of these sessions as possible, folks will be able to really get a picture of what congregations are doing, what you can do in your home community, how we can engage as a Reformed Jewish movement on sustainability issues in new ways and sort of building on the work that we've done. So with that, I again want to thank our presenters for an incredible job. Thank all of our participants for joining us today, for the great questions, and hopefully we will hear from you again in November, if not sooner.
Yes, and just to reiterate the website that Sue mentioned at the beginning of our session, Million Minutes for Peace, celebrating today UN's International Day of Peace. And again, we'd like to thank you. If you have any questions, you're welcome to be in touch with us. This webinar and PowerPoint presentation will be archived on our website by the end of the week. Thank you, and Chag Sukkot Sameach, and thank you to our speakers and to our attendees. Have a great day.